Today I would like to invite you to listen to the Dhammapada of the Buddha Shakyamuni, the 75th verse from the Buddhist scriptures on the YouTube channel TN Thai in the USA. Surely the path that leads to worldly gain is one, and the path that leads to Nibbana is another. Understanding this, the bhikkhu, the disciple of the Buddha, should not rejoice in worldly favors, but cultivate detachment. Dear listeners, the Buddha's teaching in this verse illuminates the distinction between two very different ways of life. One path is tied to wealth, honor, fame, and all forms of worldly satisfaction. The other path leads to liberation, to Nibbana, the cessation of suffering, the freedom from attachment and craving. These two paths are clear as day when we look with mindful eyes. Yet the hearts of many wander, thinking that comfort, praise, and gifts are blessings of the highest order. The Buddha guides us to see the truth. The path that satisfies the senses is not the path that frees the mind. In the time of the Buddha, there were many monks and disciples who struggled with this truth. Even those who wore the robes and lived in monasteries often faced the subtle temptation of worldly gain. Gifts from laypeople, praise from neighbors, attention from communities. All of these seemed like rewards for virtue, and the mind, not yet fully awake, often rejoiced in these favors. But the Buddha's insight tells us that such rejoicing is the very root of bondage. When the mind clings to praise or comfort, it is like a bird trapped in a cage of, or robes. His heart was stirred. A part of him delighted in their appreciation. Another part worried about what might happen if the offerings ceased. The Buddha, seeing the subtle attachments arising in Sona's mind, taught him to reflect. Do not rejoice in worldly favors, for they are impermanent. True joy is born from detachment, not from the praise of others or the gifts they give. This teaching does not reject kindness or generosity from others. The Buddha does not ask the monk to avoid offerings. Rather, he instructs the mind to remain unattached, to receive without clinging, to accept with gratitude but not with expectation, to see the world as it is, impermanent, conditioned, fleeting, and not to mistake it for the source of ultimate peace. Every gift carries the seed of impermanence. Every praise carries the echo of change. To rejoice in them is to plant the seed of future suffering. The path that leads to worldly gain is attractive. It appeals to every sense. The eyes delight in beauty. The ears delight in praise. The tongue delights in fine food. The body delights in comfort. The mind delights in respect and recognition. The heart, untrained, follows these delights eagerly. And yet, the Buddha shows us that this path is like a mirage. It appears real from a distance, but when approached, it fades away. To walk this path is to wander endlessly in desire, chasing shadows that cannot satisfy. In contrast, the path to Nibbana requires courage. It requires mindfulness and vigilance. It asks the bhikkhu to look beyond appearances, to see the impermanence of all conditions, to understand that attachment is the root of suffering and detachment is the gate to freedom. When the mind cultivates detachment, it experiences a joy that is unshakable, unconditioned, and profound. The peace that arises from detachment is not dependent on others, on gifts, or on worldly recognition. It is the fruit of inner freedom. The Buddha teaches that even small pleasures in the world, if clung to, can block progress. A monk may be praised for his eloquence, honored for his service, or adored for his meditation. Yet if he rejoices in this, he has taken a step away from Nibbana. The wise mind recognizes praise and honor as temporary shadows. They do not allow themselves to be carried away. Instead, they cultivate detachment in every action, every thought, every moment of life. This is the discipline of the heart that leads to liberation. Sona, observing the Buddha's teaching, began to practice detachment with mindfulness. When offerings came, he accepted them with a bowed heart, but without attachment. When laypeople praised him, he smiled silently, remembering the impermanence of all things. In this way, his mind became steady. He began to taste the unshakable joy of freedom, a joy not dependent on praise, gifts, or worldly gain. Slowly, his attachment loosened like ice melting in the sun. He began to walk the path of Nibbana with lightness and clarity. The Buddha's guidance for all bhikkhus is consistent. See the difference between the path of the world and the path of liberation. The worldly path promises satisfaction, but delivers only temporary pleasure and eventual suffering. The path to Nibbana may seem austere, yet it leads to enduring peace, limitless compassion, and complete freedom from craving. To discern these paths is wisdom itself. To choose detachment over attachment is courage itself. Detachment is not coldness. It is not rejection of life. Rather, it is the understanding that all things are impermanent, conditioned, and interdependent. To cultivate detachment is to love without clinging, to serve without expectation, to live fully without grasping. When the bhikkhu practices in this way, every step becomes meditation, every breath becomes insight, every moment becomes liberation. Worldly favors, though often intended as kindness, are also tests of the heart. When one receives recognition, one sees the depth of attachment in one's mind. When one is praised, one observes the subtle arising of ego. When gifts are offered, one notes the desire to possess. To rejoice in any of these is to feed the fire of self. To cultivate detachment is to see clearly, to smile, and to remain at peace. The Buddha's verse, therefore, is a gentle warning and a profound guide. He does not ask the monk to abandon the world entirely. He does not forbid kindness or generosity. He asks only for clarity of mind. He asks for wisdom in how we relate to the world. He asks that we walk the path of freedom even while living in the midst of conditioned life. By discerning the difference between worldly gain and liberation, the bhikkhu becomes strong in detachment, steady in mind, and joyful in the Dharma. To rejoice in worldly favors is natural for an untrained mind, yet the enlightened mind sees beyond them. True joy does not arise from praise, wealth, or recognition. True joy arises from understanding, from insight into impermanence, from the freedom that comes with letting go. The disciple who understands this cultivates a heart like still water, undisturbed by waves of praise or criticism. Every moment becomes a meditation, every interaction a practice, every breath a step toward Nibbana. The path that leads to Nibbana requires perseverance. It is not always easy to accept detachment in the face of worldly temptation. Gifts may be abundant, praise frequent, comfort alluring. Yet the wise bhikkhu practices mindfulness in every encounter. He sees the impermanence of all offerings. He notices the arising of attachment and lets it go. He smiles inwardly at the mind's restlessness, guiding it gently back to equanimity. In this way, the disciple transforms the mundane into the sacred, receiving gifts. Each sensation is an invitation to cultivate detachment. This is the practice that leads steadily toward Nibbana. Detachment is not separation from life. It is full engagement without clinging. It is love without expectation. It is action without self-reference. When the bhikkhu understands this, he experiences a joy that cannot be shaken. Praise does not swell the heart. Gifts do not bind. The Buddha's teaching shines like a lamp in darkness. He guides the mind from attachment to freedom, from pride to humility, from desire to contentment. The bhikkhu who cultivates detachment follows this light with every breath. He does not rejoice in worldly favors. He does not cling to recognition. He does not seek comfort or status. He rests in the truth of impermanence and the joy of freedom. Surely the path that leads to worldly gain is one, and the path that leads to Nibbana is another. Understanding this, the bhikkhu, the disciple of the Buddha, should not rejoice in worldly favors, but cultivate detachment. Dear listeners, the Buddha's wisdom shines clearly in this verse, for it illuminates the difference between fleeting pleasures and eternal freedom. The worldly path is seductive, filled with wealth, honor, gifts, praise, and admiration. These things appear attractive, and the untrained mind is naturally drawn to them. Even among the Sangha, monks can experience the subtle allure of recognition. A gift received, a kind word spoken, a community's praise, all can stir attachment, leading to craving and eventually suffering. This is why the Buddha instructs the bhikkhu to cultivate detachment. The story of the bhikkhu Sona illustrates this truth vividly. Sona practiced diligently and observed the precepts carefully. Yet when villagers offered him food, robes, and other favors, he felt his heart flutter with delight. praise from neighbors, acknowledgement from fellow monks, gifts from the laity. All these seemed like signs of merit and virtue. And yet, in his heart, attachment was growing. The Buddha, seeing this subtle clinging, guided Sona to reflect, "Do not rejoice in worldly favors, for all things are impermanent. Rejoice instead in detachment, for it leads to freedom." This teaching is profound. Receiving gifts or praise is not wrong in itself. The fault arises when the mind clings to them. When one begins to identify with the recognition, every gift, every honor, every favor is impermanent. The more one rejoices in them, the more one is bound to impermanence. To rejoice in worldly things is like drinking salt water. The thirst only grows stronger. The path to nibbana requires seeing beyond appearances, beyond temporary satisfaction, to the unshakable joy of inner freedom. Worldly gain tempts the senses and excites the mind. The eyes delight in beauty, the ears in praise, the body in comfort, the mind in recognition. The fool follows these temptations eagerly, with awareness and gratitude, but without attachment. This is the cultivation of detachment, the art of being fully present yet not clinging. Detachment is not rejection. It is engagement without grasping. When the bhikkhu practices in this way, he transforms the ordinary into the sacred. Receiving a gift becomes an act of mindfulness. Hearing praise becomes a practice of understanding. Worldly favors are tests of the heart. When praised, the mind may swell with pride. When offered a gift, the heart may tighten in grasping. When recognized, attachment can arise subtly. To rejoice in these things is to plant seeds of future suffering. To cultivate detachment is to see them clearly, smile inwardly, and remain free. This is the practice of discernment and wisdom. Even the greatest monks in history have faced these temptations. The Buddha himself, surrounded by devotees offering gifts, never clung to their praise or their offerings. He accepted with and liberation. The path that leads to nibbana is challenging, yet immensely rewarding. It requires perseverance and mindfulness. It asks the bhikkhu to look deeply at every experience, to see the impermanence and interdependence of all phenomena, to recognize that every gift, every praise, every worldly comfort is a conditioned phenomenon, transient and ever-changing. Under the morning sun, joy arose, not from the world, but from the deep understanding of truth. The Buddha's guidance teaches that the bhikkhu must always discern between fleeting satisfaction and lasting liberation. Worldly favors are temporary. Nibbana is eternal. Worldly recognition brings only temporary joy. Detachment brings unshakable bliss. The disciple who rejoices in detachment becomes a lamp in the darkness, a guide to others, a being of peace in a world of impermanence. Detachment allows the heart to be spacious. It allows the mind to be clear. It allows the disciple to act with compassion, to speak with kindness, to live with wisdom. No praise can inflate the heart. No gift can bind it. No worldly favor can disturb it. The mind remains serene, like a calm lake, reflecting the moon. Dear listeners, let us reflect on this teaching. In our own lives, we encounter praise, recognition, comfort, and attention. It is natural to feel pleased. Yet the Buddha calls us to see deeper, to notice the subtle arising of attachment, to practice letting go, to cultivate the joy of detachment, which leads to freedom, peace, and the end of suffering. The disciple who practices in this way understands that the path to nibbana is distinct from the path to worldly gain. One leads to craving, one leads to liberation. One binds the mind, one frees it. One gives temporary satisfaction, one gives unshakable joy. The wise bhikkhu chooses the path of freedom, even while engaging fully with life. As we walk this path, may we remember the Buddha's words: do not rejoice in worldly favors. Cultivate detachment. Receive with gratitude. Act with mindfulness. Live with wisdom. Let the heart remain light, the mind serene, the spirit free. In every moment, in every action, in every interaction, practice the joy of detachment. This is the path that leads to nibbana. This is the path that leads to awakening. Thank you for watching my video. DHAMMAPADA. I wish to bring this merit towards all disciples and sentient beings, all of whom will attain Buddhahood. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I really appreciate your time.